The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Lining up, Adrian Bello, and here it comes. Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you.
All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Game Day. I'm joined by my guest for this episode. I am joined by my guest, Oscar. I invited Oscar on here because we're going to talk about baseball, and I know he's the main man I go to talk about baseball because I am only just getting into it more than casually this season than previous seasons. But so, first off, how are you, Oscar? I was saying, how are you?
Pretty good. Really excited for, especially today, because today's the first two rounds of the competition picks of the 2022 MLB Amateur Draft. And I really want to know who's going to go first round. Personally, I think it's going to be Henderson, the shortstop, who, I don't know if I sent it to you, but there was an article in which he was asked what would he say or feel if he was picked in the first round by the Orioles. He'd say that he'd feel like they secure their chances at a World Series in the next 2 or 3 years. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Wow, that's a pretty bold claim, but I respect the boldness from him. There's definitely been a lot going on in the MLB. Oscar, you're a Dodgers fan. You want to get into a bit of what they've been doing?
Uh-huh.
So,
you want me to start right now?
Yeah.
Well, beyond Kershaw having 80 innings and having almost 200 ERA plus and starting his first All-Star game, which I know some people feel was kind of like snub other pitchers, but I feel like he deserved it given his Hall of Fame career. I feel like why not now? I know Sandy Alcantara deserves the most praise as a starting pitcher, but I think if he continues to prosper, he'll have his time. The light, like he'll have his time in stardom. But beyond that, like of course, Freddie Freeman, who kind of now very controversial signing with the Dodgers. At first, I thought it was just business move or personal move, but now it looks as there was some like underhand contract dealing, which you never like to see, especially when like this really emotionally impacted him, seeing him crying when he visited Atlanta again, and you obviously tell he's very hurt, and you never like to see that. But he's been, especially as of recent, he's been like Barry Bonds. He's been hitting home runs. He has a 600 plus batting average and almost 2,000 OPS. He's been pretty lights out.
Yeah, and on the other side of the coin, I am the Phillies fan, and we've been missing our main guy in Bryce. He's been injured for quite some time. I actually talked about it a couple episodes back, talking about how the Phillies can still find a way to be successful without him, which they kind of have, but the issue is they're I think they're still in third place because of just how good second and first are right above them. They kind of are struggling to break through because they're behind the Mets and the Braves still, and they're behind quite a few games on both teams.
It's a cutthroat division.
Yeah. The Mets and the Braves are the Mets are they lost recently, I think, but they're almost a full 10 games above the Phillies, and then the Braves are about 8 games ahead of them, or like 7 or 8, one of the two. They're like pretty much far and ahead of both, and the National League being the National League, it doesn't even look like they're going to be able to secure themselves a wild card spot because, well, I mean, the Brewers and Cardinals have 50 and the Phillies have 49 right now, but like it's like pretty like close. Like I don't think they'll be able to secure like a spot in the play. I mean, obviously there's still a full like how many games left? Like let me see. Wait, I'm trying to look at the standings and try and think. But you know, there's still a ton of games left to play. But you can really tell that the Bryce Harper injury is really affecting them because it's like, I don't know. They've been doing pretty well in the sense of like they're winning most of the series, but they're losing certain games that just really affect them terribly. Like I don't really know like how else to describe it, but it's like, I mean, they've been playing well, but it's just not been well enough to, you know, break through the top 2 in the division. It's kind of like tough to watch in a sense like that, you know, because I mean Schwarber's been doing pretty well, but like I know some guys are going through slumps, and then it's just kind of tough not having Harper there to like really kind of lead that team.
I don't mean to be kind of like a hater in the sense of the reigning world champ, but it doesn't seem like the run Atlanta has had recently is like really sustainable unless they make like a really big acquisition in the deadline. They really relied on Austin Riley, was really great, but really shaky hitter. He'll go like a month where he's Bryce Harper or something like that, and then he'll have very cold streaks. I think you kind of very much see it in the team, and right now it's paying off because of course he's in the prime of his career, and everything's going well. But you can't really rely on a player like that. Mainly they've been relying on like 4 key players, Spencer Strider. Of course, like I don't know how long he'll last because he's only pitched 80 innings in a full minor league season, and he's in lights out so far. But you don't really want to mess with pitchers like that, especially in this modern age where injuries are so prominent. And you're putting a lot on the line. Mike Soroka, especially, like you've very server and learned the lesson, and I hope they give him a break just for his longevity's sake. But I don't know. It's a very tough division. Steve Cohen and Infinite Wallet are just pulling doors, owning up to his contract. Pete Alonso is looking like Pete Alonso instead of Cody Bellinger, and it's pretty good being a Mets fan, I guess. I don't know if you keep up much with the Twitter, like online forum talk, but Mets fans, despite any struggles, they have like an infinite wallet, which the Yankees and Dodgers kind of also have. But Steve Cohen, he isn't afraid of taxation. I don't know if you've seen those articles where he wants to go. He doesn't care about like the MLB tax. He says it doesn't matter to him, and he specifically made rules for him, and he doesn't really care. I think it's kind of unfair for other teams, but it's kind of great to watch.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole another debate that I've seen, especially online. I know you've talked to me about it quite a bit, of just like when it comes to contract talks, because obviously some teams are gonna have like much more money to work with than others, and kind of getting more into the contract talks, there's kind of 2 big names out there that like the contract talks have been like making big news. The first one in recent news, Juan Soto rejecting a 15-year extension with the Nationals, and now it's like it might lead them to trading him. And as you described it to me, it can be one of like the biggest blockbuster trades of all time. Walk us through that a bit.
I mean, there really hasn't been a comparable trade in like the modern baseball era. A-Rod, his trade really didn't matter. Even like the Dodgers last year trade Turner, Max Scherzer thing, because Juan Soto is a perennial MVP candidate, and he's not even in his prime like, physically, but he's 22 or 23. He has 2.5 years of like, leverage before he gets free agency, and that's for like a competitive team like the Dodgers. That's the next 3 postseasons. If our Eagles according to plan, and to some people, I understand it doesn't seem that reasonable, but prospects you shouldn't prospect for it. I think prospects are like they're produced, and if you just invest and keep your coaching at a high level, prospects you'll have no problem finding them and creating them. So you should use them as much as you can because they're not guaranteed. Whereas like a player like Juan Soto, it's like once in every like 30, 40 years. This guy's a natural born hitter and he hasn't even peaked yet. When you saw him in the World Series, he was an on base machine. Like he's meant for like history. This is a guy that dodged me. Trey Turner choked in both World Series, really. But if you get Juan Soto, this is like the Yankees want him, Astros want him, Dodgers want him. This is the guy that he's on Bryce Harper's level. He's probably, you might disagree, but I think he's better than Bryce Harper.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about him. I know there's like a certain, like, I don't know if it's like entailing to like a certain team or not, but like I know there's like a certain fan base out there that just doesn't like the guy. I haven't like seen much reason as to why they don't.
He's very smug with his Soto shuffle.
But it was just kind of crazy to see because I got like the news of it. Like I saw, it was like, oh, he rejected a 15-year like extension, and that like he rejected all his money from them, and then people were kind of like talking like potential trades, and like how you kind of said, there's like no really comparable trade for it. So it's like people were like having to like scramble to think of like what teams could do to like trade for the guy, and you could tell like a lot of people were struggling to put together a lot of like sensible trades. Like if I had to, make it comparable to another sport right now in basketball, Kevin Durant wants to get traded, and obviously the situation. Yeah, the situations aren't obviously the same in the sense of like Kevin Durant's much older, getting towards like I wouldn't say like or probably you could say end of his prime, but like he's still playing at a high level. But like I compare it in the sense of like right now nobody knows what a trade package for Kevin Durant in the NBA looks like, especially because of all the other trades that have just happened where you've seen people giving up 5 future first round picks for another guy, as well as like multiple players. It's like when that trade happened, I'm referring to the Rudy Gobert one. Everyone immediately was like, "Well, then what the heck does a Kevin Durant trade look like?" That would be like 4 or 5 first round picks. You'd have to swap like maybe 3 picks with each other, and then that's also including like young assets. So it's like in the same sense here. But like much more drastically, you have this, like you're saying, super young guy, perennial MVP, and yet no one knows what a trade would look like because what exactly do you put together for a guy with that much value?
Yeah,
it's honestly some pretty crazy news, and it just makes me like. Almost in a sense, like I guess you'd say, like excited to see what exactly does go down, because there's still plenty of time for like the Nationals, but like at the same time, it's like you just kind of sit there and you wonder what are the people in that organization even thinking in the sense of like, where do they go from here?
Well, I mean, another factor to add to it, I mean, it kind of detracts from the whole rest of the MLB, but it's more of a business factor, is that the current owners have been for a while considering to sell the whole franchise, and they think, or some people speculate, that having Juan Soto, that brand, would increase the value of which they would sell the whole franchise. So there's more personal business motives at hand than just best baseball moves. Because, there are definitely other things they could do with Juan Soto, like building a team around them, investing in better analytics and talent development. They already have, they've had talent. They have been able to retain it because of their low budget, and they refuse to change. They refuse to budge. They got a World Series, but it's boom or bust for them, and I guess they realize that it's not profitable anymore.
Yeah, and that's just a real interesting to think about, because it's just like, yeah, you got to make sure, like on the business side of things, you can't just trade this guy, because like even if you get all these like crazy future assets, like you're saying, if they're planning to sell the team, all it is kind of just assets, and that's not really like it's all, yeah, it's like all hypothetical and potential, like there's nothing like set in stone, versus if they're selling a team, like, oh look, we're selling a team and we have Juan Soto on it, that would entice people to want to buy the franchise. But if you're like, oh, here's our franchise and all we have is these potential future assets that can turn into something, rather than an asset right there right now that whoever buys the team can build around, like you're saying. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, again, going back to like the Kevin Durant situation. I don't think it's something that people should expect to happen like anytime soon, but it is something to like keep your eye on. Like, it's there in the background, and at any moment something could happen with it. But it's more likely, how you were saying, that they kind of exercise their options first, of like maybe building a team around them and stuff, or investing more in different things, but in different avenues. But I don't know, it's always funny to me that like it's obviously like prioritizing the business, but yet so many times these owners, when it comes to like building teams, you hear so many stories, and especially from the fan bases, of like so many teams not willing to open up their pockets for like team building. And it's always, and of course it goes back to what we were talking about, that like certain cities and their teams are obviously going to have less money to work with than like a big name, big market type of area and team. But it is real interesting to see what comes out of this whole situation. And then you also mentioned that Aaron Judge has contract talks as well.
Yeah. Kept up with that much, or do you want me to
explain a bit, because I that was one I didn't hear about, so I was like, oh, that's interesting, I want to hear what's going on with that.
The Yankees offered Aaron Judge like a contract north of $300 million, with like 260 guaranteed, because there's deferred money that's based on at-bats and other like contractual agreements. That that was 261 guaranteed, which a lot of contracts don't have, especially franchises with the Yankees, because they have a lot of money, but they're really stingy about it. Kind of like they're comparable to the Nats, because I don't know if you kept paid attention, but they defer a lot of money. Mm-hmm. They deferred a lot of money to Strasburg, especially, but he's a really bad contract right now. Aaron Judge, I honestly thought that it was a bad decision, and that like $300 or $260 million guaranteed was well worth it. But given his current performance, like MVP status, he can attend. He seems like he was right. He's worth more than I thought he was. The Yankees thought he was. He seems like a real MVP. I know Altuve snubbed them too. The whole Astros cheating scandal, he could potentially, if he wins this year, be a two-time MVP in my eyes.
That's a real interesting situation there. I think that is like interesting to me because it's like it's very rare, like in a sense of seeing like so much money put into like the guaranteed status. Like, even when it comes to like watching like football, even then a lot of owners like they're kind of weary about giving guaranteed money because like obviously you can never predict what happens, but then you also get in certain situations where a guy is given too much guaranteed money. But it's interesting to see like how you were saying how they kind of are being stingy with it, but it's like it's weird to see that happen when it's a player of that status where it's like they try and go the conservative route, and it's like it's almost like in a sense like just out of the ordinary to see, knowing that based on play it should like be worth more in a sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, if anyone can justify it, it's him, especially with the Yankees being 64-28 right now.
Exactly.
That leads all of baseball. They're on the top, especially in the American League. Interesting to see what comes out of that. And then, as we're talking all about this, there's kind of just one, like, main topic on my mind that I especially, like, want to talk to you about and get, like, your real, like, in-depth opinions on. Because it was something we talked about before the season started, because there was that whole lockout issue. With all this, and it's more appropriate to talk about because right now it's All-Star Weekend, right?
Yes.
Over the years, in a sense, I don't know, maybe you can make that claim more than I can, but people have like talked about baseball and the MLB as a whole just kind of declining in popularity. And so it's like, even with all this like news we're discussing, I know for a fact there's going to be like a ton of people that are just like, oh, well, it's not like comparable to the other leagues. But like, in a sense, what do you think about that whole argument that like it's declining in popularity? And if you agree with it, what do you think the league can either do, or where do you think they can go to like kind of regain that popularity if they've been losing it?
Well, I think with like most things in the modern day, the culture war with MLB, they have this great conflict between the old school MLB that in their prime, where you couldn't show off, you couldn't bat flip, you got thrown at and you took it like a man or whatever thought it was. And then like if I hit a home run off of you, I'm gonna pimp it out, and like I can celebrate this, and I can celebrate striking you out, and I can yell, I can scream, like, but you better not throw at me because injuries are already at an all-time high. There's two different ideologies, both with their respective histories, but like it's all trending towards you don't want to throw at people. It's not sustainable. That you don't want to have the old school mentality. You don't want to, rapper man Tatis for hitting a home run, a grand slam or whatever, and pimping it out, even though he had a huge lead. Like that's not competitive. Those old rules aren't really as competitive. They're just outdated. If you want a competitive league, which sport fans want, they want competition. They want outstanding players. They want players to struggle and rebound. They don't want to see these stupid rules that kind of just hinder all of that. And I think if they allowed themselves to let players express themselves a bit more, like the media hype and like there's potential everywhere for there. Trevor Bauer was a great example of that before. He had his thing, but Jazz Chisholm Jr., like the Marlins fans, from what I see, love him. Acuna, he's adored by the Atlanta fans. Of course, he has like the talent to back it up, but his antics, like they're expressive, and players kind of love him for that, regardless of their opinions on his takes. I think that's like the direction we're heading. And that's like the direction the MLB should lean towards, because their other roles are kind of outdated.
And it's interesting you bring up like those different players and like how their fan bases react to them. Comparing it to like other leagues, do you think the MLB can do a better job in terms of marketing, especially a lot of these players? Because like obviously it might be a bit more difficult, but like you see it throughout like all the other leagues that there's certain players that are like heralded and like pushed as like the poster child, the how would you describe it, like this is the poster player of the league, this is the main guy of the league. Like they try and push it. Like I know like the NBA, there's always like one person that like it's almost like it changes every season, where like they're pushing this one guy as like as the poster boy, where it's like or like they push multiple players as the face of the league. That's what I was thinking of. Like the NFL has been heavily pushing ever since he like blew up. Patrick Mahomes is like the face of the league. He's all on all the highlights and stuff like that. Do you think the league can do a better job at marketing in that sense, or do you think they're doing that but it's just not gaining the same type of traction?
Well, I mean, I think they market it enough, but I think the problem with it is what they market. They kind of it's very like, it's not very like serious most of the time. It's kind of like they always, I don't know what it is. It's too those All-Star game posters, those like even like the Dodger posters are kind of they're casual, and they don't really, I don't know, it doesn't really sound like, I think sports fans love competitiveness in like their ads, their ad campaigns, their players, stuff like that. And I think they should just like add a more aggressive message. Like I know that's how the Yankees fan base is, and I mean, look for how long they're like their fan base has sustained them financially, and give their ownership as well.
Yeah, and maybe it's like, I guess in a sense, like it is kind of like an uphill battle for the MLB at this point, because it's like you said, where like whatever they do, it's gonna anger like one side or the other, how you mentioned and stuff, and it's like, I don't know, I've just seen like a ton of talk of just like what can the MLB do to regain a lot of its popularity. And like I know one of the main arguments that I've seen is the whole issue of the way they black out games, where it's like you can't watch your team's stuff, and it's like in some cases, like I don't know, to me it's just kind of a weird subject anyways, because like you hear so many different experiences. Like when doing my research like on this topic, I saw this one guy, he was like talking about how he lives like 6 hours away from New York, but yet both the Mets and the Yankees are blacked out for him. So it's like if he wants to watch them when they're like playing, it's either they have to be not in New York, or he has to like make that 6 hour drive to go watch them. And then like another thing I've seen is people talk about like the availability in a sense. I guess they don't like have other than MLB TV, I don't know if they're like on any other like streaming services. I know I have MLB TV because my dad gets it for free with I think T-Mobile, I think it is. And so I'm able to watch the Phillies like pretty much all their games, as long as they're not playing here in California.
Have you kept up with the All-Star, the Futures game from yesterday?
I didn't actually get to see it. I was planning to look into it.
Funnily enough, when Dave Roberts was asked about if he was going to watch the Futures game, he said they couldn't watch it in the clubhouse, and he didn't get to watch it because the clubhouse doesn't have Peacock, the NBC streaming thing, because it was one of those contractual agreements where it would only be shown on the Peacock service, and the clubhouse didn't have that, so they couldn't watch it. They couldn't watch it, which kind of just highlights the whole thing you were mentioning, where blackouts and these contractual agreements with these very niche companies that don't have the fan base that normal cable, the average person would usually have had in these contracts. Be able to watch it. It's very selective. It's kind of ridiculous considering the actual prices of attending a Dodger game. It's just so expensive, and the modern time they should kind of just relax on it. I understand the need for the economic just profits, and I know you need to make profits, but it's kind of exorbitant, the food prices, the drink prices. It's just kind of, I don't know. And these blackouts only further make it worse and less unattainable for the average resident. And so they're kind of hurting themselves with this whole financial gap. The financial might of the average Los Angeles resident is not what it used to be.
Yeah, that's another thing I saw was just people saying that if they want more fans, they need to make a lot of the stuff cheaper, in the sense of not only just ticket sales, but I've seen a lot of more people talk about how where they build the ballparks, almost in a sense they've been talking about it just needs to be more accessible, because you look at Dodger Stadium, it's I guess the issue people have with that is not only the cost, but then look at how much of a hassle it is to not only find parking, but then to get out of there once the game is over, and then the whole issue of just blackouts. It's tough for people to get into the sport when they can't even watch certain teams because of the blackout, or something happens how you mentioned contractually where the game's only being shown on one place. And it's somewhat an issue with the other leagues as well, but not I guess not to that high of a degree, because it's the NFL and NBA have the place where you can watch the games. They're also on TV, but at that point, when it's on TV and cable, it's at a certain selection. And then obviously the NFL is partnered with so many different places that honestly, they might start suffering from the whole contractual agreement thing soon, because it's there's all these different places. One day one of the games is being live streamed on Twitch. Then another day, this game is only available on Peacock, and it's only available here. So I get the whole rise of streaming service, and that's a whole another topic. But I think maybe some of these sports are getting too invested into it, because it's starting to make it not only expensive in the fact that you need all these other places, all these other streaming services in order to watch the sport you want, but then it just makes it confusing, because now you're having to truly track down this stuff instead of just being able to casually watch it. You're well, I gotta see, what day is it on? Is it gonna be on TV? Am I gonna have to go to a different streaming service? Am I gonna have to go to the NFL's own sort of streaming service? And I've seen that's what I've seen with baseball too, is that people are just well, it's either you pay for the MLB service yourself, and even then that doesn't get rid of the blackouts for you, or you track it down in different ways, and at the end of the day, the league is the one suffering, because all this confusion, all these expenses just cause people to do one thing, and that's pirate, the content. It causes them to go look for other ways to watch the games live while they're happening without any interference from blackouts or having to have just one streaming service in order to watch, the games that you want.
And that's another thing, that a lot of the main baseball fan base is pretty old. And a lot of them don't know how to pirate, or don't want to pirate, because the more like Republican kind of financial thing of like, I can't just do it like that. But that's a whole chunk of like their usual fan base. They're just cutting out for good, and they've cut out for a while, and they've noticed it financially, and they're trying to cultivate this whole new audience. But it's just, you need to learn from their past mistakes.
Yeah, and that's just a whole nother thing too, is that like tying back to the whole expenses, especially at the like ballparks, it's like there's so much that goes into attracting an audience, and one of the things is just like visual interest, in the sense, it's like how many people tune in. Obviously, like, this is kind of like, I guess you could say, like a bad argument, because it's like the biggest game of the sport. But when it comes to the Super Bowl, it's like, how many times do we see people who don't even watch a single game all season still tune in because you look at the stadium, it's packed out, you see all these people interested in it. It's almost like like I guess you could say like following, like, people essentially, they see others getting excited in the fun, in a sense, and so they just join in just to be a part of it. And then very similarly, I mean, obviously, this is not to say that when the World Series happens, the stadiums aren't packed out with the fans there to support, but watching throughout the season, it's like, how many times do we see a game happening and like the ballpark is only has like half the attendance there? It's like, it's in itself doesn't help, which again, I guess ties back to the whole expenses of the ballparks thing, because you're looking at a stadium and it's half empty, and so it's like, it doesn't give you that sense of occasion of like, oh, this is a game I have to tune in for.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, that can just tie it to a whole other thing of when talking about the interest for the game. Like, I've seen people talking about like, well, what ways can we make the game more intriguing or interesting in terms of like performance? But it's like, I don't know, some people kind of have unrealistic expectations of like, that they expect like every game to be, a shootout, or like, that they just expect like every game to be high scoring, which, I mean, you're not really going to get that when watching baseball, which again kind of goes back to the whole thing of like, I guess it's just maybe at this point it's like a thing of like the MLB knows their audience, and so it's like they maybe don't feel the need to expand as long as they still retain that core audience that they have. I don't know, because it's like,
I can see that.
I can see like it a bit, that it's like they know that it's gonna, like how I mentioned earlier, it's like an uphill battle trying to get more people to like be interested in the sport. So it's like maybe they've kind of accepted that this is their core audience, let's just focus on them. There's about 6 minutes left in this episode, so I just real quickly want to ask you this, because I know when this is brought up, this is especially not only like a hot topic in baseball, but it's again one that tears like the fan bases like evenly down the line. There's support for both sides. Do you think the season needs to be shortened in order for things to get more interesting, to give games more of a sense of occasion?
I didn't like this take at all. I highly disagreed. But I mean, look at most major league rosters right now. A lot of important key players are injured repeatedly. There's like Jacob deGrom's, Max Scherzer's, Acuna's, Tatis, Bryce Harper, Walker Buehler, Dustin May. Like all those, that's just to name a few. Steven Strasburg, his contract has been made horrendous now because of how injury prone he is. Just that's the worst thing.
Because I've seen, arguments for it and against it, and it's one of those things that, like, to me, it's more tough than, like, I know in the NBA, people always, like, talk about, like, oh, should they shorten the season? But, like, to me, I think baseball is the one where it's seriously most difficult to really kind of give a definitive answer as to whether, yes, they should shorten it or no. Because we've kind of seen examples, like, on both sides. Like, obviously, some people are like, well, if you shorten it to this amount of games, that's not enough. That's not enough in the sense of, like, games for the people to watch, but also it doesn't give enough time for, like, teams to get into a rhythm, like season turnarounds, like, you wouldn't be able to see certain historic turnarounds if the season shortened. You also, stats would take effect because it's like there's not as many games, so a lot of players are going to see their stats, almost in a sense. I mean, it can go both ways. The stats are going to deteriorate because they don't have as many games, but some can see a rise because it's a smaller sample size. So I agree that it's one of those ones where it's really tough to give an answer because it's like you want to shorten it maybe for the health of the players, but also it's like there's so many things that would just be affected with whatever outcome is chosen.
Exactly. That's like the nuance with all of it.
Yeah, and so I think, like, it would have to be something, like, especially because it can be something drastic where, you cut nearly, like, half of the season out when shortening it, But any other thoughts or final, just things you want to talk about before we close out?
No.
All right.
That's it.
All right. Real quickly, Oscar.
Yeah.
If you had to pick a team right now, right here in July to win the World Series, who would you pick?
For the AL, I think the Yankees. For the NL, it might be a little bit biased, but I don't see anyone besides the Mets or Dodgers winning. The NLCS, I think the Dodgers are going to make it. I think New York, Los Angeles World Series. And
hey, I think that would be good for the league because two biggest markets meeting in the World Series. I mean, who knows?
I mean, the Yankees' first World Series in like over a decade, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, that would be real crazy to think about. But with that being said, thank you all for joining us for another episode. We'll see you next time.